In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not.
Okay, and we're back to the magic of editing. 4 days have passed since me and Taylor cut off the last podcast. Welcome to Do the Fail, the podcast where intermittently we will do a historic and or true crime story for you that is full of red flags and release at once every 3 days? No, twice a week. Let's do twice a week.
It's twice a week, Mondays and Wednesdays.
Easy peasy.
Yep.
So we just recorded Taylor's podcast. Now that y'all would know because I'm going to edit this so incredibly well that you will never know that this is the same conversation. Just continue over a different
It's a similar
day.
conversation because you should stop talking. Listen, stop it.
This is the marketing thing that we never learned. We just stop undermining ourselves. I'm pulling a Taylor. That's what I'm doing here.
You are. Ooh, okay.
So you're
I'm
drinking
ready.
a Diet Coke.
I am.
Okay.
But pretend I just had that Molson, that Canadian Molson.
I've never had a Molson's. I don't
I
think
don't
I
think
want
I have
one.
either. I was gonna say it. I might try.
I don't know. I don't know if I need to. There's so many good microbreweries now.
I know.
So my story, okay, I'm going to dive right into it. So in the interest of bringing you obscure stories, I'm going with one of the most obscure stories I've ever come across.
Okay.
It has to do, once again, with the death penalty and with women.
Ooh.
I think the women who are put to death by the state are usually pretty famous because it's such a rare occurrence. And I pointed that out in the episode we did with Tiffany Cole. I forget which episode number that was. But Taylor, I'm going to ask you to give me a guess. And I'm not talking about women. I'm talking about just generally speaking. Guess which state per capita has the most executions in the country?
Texas.
I wrote
Utah.
here in the outline.
Florida.
I wrote here in the outline. Literally, I'm quoting the outline. I quote, I knew you would say Texas, so I wrote it in my outline. And nope, you're wrong. End quote. I totally knew it.
Wow. Amazing.
So the answer is actually Oklahoma. So per 100,000 people, Oklahoma executes 2.83. So if you're in a football stadium in Oklahoma, 1.5 of the people are in that stadium with you are going to be executed by the state, roughly.
Wow.
Texas, by comparison, executes only 1.97, or about 2 people per 100,000, so per capita. But if you look at totals since the death row was instituted or reinstituted and deemed constitutional since which is like 1976 until 2020, Texas has actually executed 570 people, which makes it so much higher than the next highest state. The next highest state in total, not per capita, is Virginia with 113 during that same time period. So 113, 570. So Texas is like, I think they did math on this where once every 4 weeks, Texas executes somebody, which is like rare for every other state to do.
Wow.
In total, Texas has executed 6 women. And I bet most people are familiar with the most famous one of those women. Do you know who I'm talking about here?
Eileen Wuornos?
No, that's Florida.
Oh, I have no idea.
Carla Faye Tucker.
I don't know who that is. I might know who
Okay.
that is.
I'll get into it. The story of her crime was super compelling because she did it with an axe, which is like the most metal way to kill somebody ever. And she also, like, there was a sexual component to it, which, like, I'm not going to go into. I think it's all bullshit, but whatever, doesn't matter. But, like, her story was interesting. Also, she was kind of pretty, so people paid attention to her, right? That was kind of the dynamic of it. And she also, in my opinion, just had the name, right? Like Henry Lee Lucas, John Wilkes Booth, James Earl Ray, Carla Faye Tucker. Like, there's a staccato to it. It's got to be 3 names. There's like a staccato tone to the name that has to hit right, and then people just remember you, I think.
Well, I think we say their middle names so that like we can distinguish them from other people. Because like there's a bunch of Carla Tuckers out there that didn't do anything.
Is there a famous evangelist named Carla Tucker?
I don't know. I'll look it up. But I think that's why we add the middle name to these like infamous people.
Maybe that. Although we don't do it for Dahmer. Dahmer had a middle name, didn't he? Did he?
Let's see.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
I'm sure this is also in your thing.
Yeah, Lionel. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer.
But Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, you're right, does not roll off the tongue.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Like, it doesn't hit right. The note has to hit right. Anyways, I'm belaboring the point. I don't have a middle name, so I can never be a famous killer.
I remember that about you because we played that dumb game at work where you had to say your middle name. If you didn't have a middle name, you had to say watermelon. So you had to say your name was far as watermelon token sandwich. Do
Your
you remember that?
memory, I can't. I don't, Taylor. I don't know which is true. Either I have the worst memory of anybody I've ever met in my entire life, or you have the best memory of anybody except maybe Jay Godfrey,
Oh my God.
or both are true.
Oh my God. I think maybe both.
Could be
But I
both.
have a weird memory. Anyway.
So going back to my story, the person I'm covering today arguably has one of the best serial killer names ever,
Ooh.
Betty Lou Beets.
Ooh, that is a good name.
I wrote down that she sounds like the girlfriend of a mobster in like the 1930s who's also a singer of the Tropicana Club. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I just kept picturing
Mm-hmm.
Cameron Diaz in The Mask, which is like the worst
Oh,
movie ever, but like that's
what
how her name rolls
weird,
off the tongue.
weird opinion to have.
Why?
I watched it recently and it's great.
Oh, I thought you meant like it was okay. I thought you were dissing the Cameron Diaz aspect of it, not the fact that it's a terrible movie. Maybe
Oh
it's
no,
not.
no.
Maybe I haven't seen it in many years, so maybe it holds up. I don't know.
It does hold up. I have a good memory. And also, how cute is Cameron Diaz in it? Oh my God, she's so cute.
I know that was the awakening of many young boys.
It was, I'm sure.
So this woman Betty was a series of walking red flags on her own.
Hmm.
Betty lasted 62 years on this earth from when she was born in 1937 to when she was put down by the state in the year 2020. So this isn't that ancient history. She actually was executed 2 years after Carla Faye Tucker was executed, and she still got no media attention. Nobody cared. Nobody
Huh,
cared. Meanwhile, Carla Faye Tucker was she converted to evangelism and she was on
of
TV
course.
constantly on national media. Like George W. Bush was the governor at that time, and so
Hmm.
but also it was because like he was running for president, right? So he knew he was going to run for president. And he was like, I can't look soft on crime on a Republican ballot, and so yeah, I have to kill this woman,
God, it's
basically.
so
But
weird that we let the governor make that decision. Like, what is that?
I mean, it's not really the governor. I mean, look, like sort of that's true, but it goes through so many different like
But the governor
functions.
can like do the stay of execution at like the last minute, right? Like, is that like I don't know, maybe if that's true.
Yeah, they
Is that
they can, they can. So like, but like by that point, it's already been touched by
right?
several state appellate courts, several federal appellate courts, the state Supreme Court, the actual Supreme Court. It has gone through probably like 150 different decision makers before it hits the governor. At
Yeah.
which point, like they're the ones who are signing the death warrant, and they have the ability to not sign the death warrant,
Oh, they
basically.
signed the death warrant.
Yeah,
Ew.
exactly.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but that makes sense.
Yeah, and then, look with who was it? Leslie Van Houten, the Charlie Manson person who just got released.
Yeah.
Like Gavin Newsom could have stopped that if he wanted to. He didn't, but he could have stopped that. But like that's another example. Like I didn't know that governors had that level of control where they could stop a like what is it called, parole?
Yeah. That's interesting. We had a good conversation about it on our Instagram with a couple people. I'm torn, but also feel like it's been a really long time. But also like I don't know. Those crimes are so vivid in our memories.
I
You know.
know. I don't know how I feel about it. On the one for the sake of true crime, I'm glad she's out. But in terms of like actual justice being served, I don't think that was a good idea.
Yeah.
That's my take on it. Going back to Betty. So Betty's upbringing wasn't the greatest. She was born into an impoverished household with an abusive dad and a seemingly mentally ill mom.
Hmm.
Betty became deaf as a child because of measles, which apparently, I looked this up, happens to 1 in 1,000 kids. So 1 in 1,000 kids who get measles end up being deaf, which is nuts. I did not know that was a
Well,
thing.
we don't have measles anymore, so that's good. As long as you get your kids vaccinated, it should
Yeah,
be
but
okay.
okay, so we still have to get vaccinated for it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You
So
get the
you
MMR, you
could,
get the measles, mumps, rubella. I think when you're a baby you get it. Like right your first day. That's one of the ones you get.
well, I guess in this, what year was she born? 1932. Yeah, I guess back then they didn't have the vaccine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she also reported that she was sexually abused by her father as young as 5. By age 12, her mom had checked herself into a mental institution, which like meant that she would have to take care of her siblings. So she had to be like an adult by like 12, basically. And
Poor thing.
my general read of this situation is I think that if women just weren't happy with their lives and their husbands just beating them and abusing them constantly, people just thought they were crazy, and they would just have to go into like a mental institution. That was
Yeah,
my
totally.
take on this. It's like,
I think you're totally right. I think that was like I'm like when you said that I was like that seems easier to do than it is now.
yeah,
Like yeah.
yeah. She just
Because they
was
were like,
like,
oh, she like, gets upset during her period and she's depressed. Put her away,
get her a
you
straight
know?
jacket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get her a
So
lobotomy.
exactly, exactly. So this situation obviously didn't help with a child who's already traumatized from sexual abuse,
Hmm.
physical abuse, alcoholic father, and all that stuff. The connection between Betty's adult childhood life and her adult life is super opaque. Again, back then, people didn't really seem to care about like the development of kids or what was going on with them. And so that
Right.
is going to be reflected in this merger of her childhood and her adult life.
Hmm.
So I'm going to cut off the childhood section here and go into her marriages because they started when she was 15, and there was a lot of them.
Oh.
So in total, there were five husbands, six marriages. Okay.
Okay.
Husband number one was Robert Franklin Branson. This was the keeper. This was the one, the first husband. They met when she was 15. They were stayed married for 17 years.
How old was he?
I don't know how old he was. I know that he was a worker in a zipper factory. That's all I know.
Okay.
So I don't know more detail than that. Husband number two is a guy named Billy York Lane. They were married for less than a year. Husband number two, marriage number three, was again Billy York Lane. They remarried 2 years after their divorce. And the second time they got remarried, it lasted for less than a year again.
Yeah.
Husband number three, marriage number four, is Ronnie Threckhold. This one lasted about a year. Husband number four, marriage number five, is Doyle Wayne Barker. This one
Okay.
lasted almost a year. Then husband number five, marriage number six, was Jimmy Don Beets. This one lasted a year. Obviously, Beets is the name that she took for herself.
That is so much paperwork. It is exhausting to change your name. And I just don't understand. You can date people. I know we've talked about this before. But changing your name is
Okay.
fucking exhausting. And you don't have to get married every year.
So I'm gonna go into this. So like part of her story is like kind of sympathetic, but I don't know how much. Maybe I'm over indexing on the sympathy, but I'll get
Okay.
into this a little bit. It kind of explains the decision making process. So like I said, Betty would marry Robert, husband number one, at 15 years old, shortly after she graduated ninth grade, and
Ugh.
that's all we know about them. Robert wasn't really a catch. He worked as a zipper factory in town, and that's basically it. The marriage ended because Robert left her for another woman. The two of them had six kids together during their marriage, so they're active. Apparently, this was probably like we don't know for sure because stuff happened a long time ago. Record keeping sucked. It was between multiple different states. Like I didn't say this, but we're bouncing between North Carolina, Virginia, Texas, different parts of Texas. Like there's not a lot of end-to-end consistency in terms of the story, and so part of it is
Hmm.
just being kind of pieced together. But apparently, the general thesis on this is that this was kind of a triggering event for Betty. It was also a
Hmm.
thing that kind of pushed her into a habit of substance abuse,
The getting
specifically
divorced,
drinking
what
a
it
lot.
was?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Because I mean, they're together 17 years, had six kids, like everything was going
Yeah.
gravy,
She
and
married
then
him
all
when
of a
she
sudden
was
this
literally a
happened.
child.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I wrote here, Betty wasn't really like a nice woman, but also she was one that was like really abused a lot and maybe
Yeah.
was pushed to her limits. So like it's kind
Hmm.
of like I think both of those things can also be true at the same time. It was noted that during her marriage to Billy, he would drink. Billy is the second husband. So during her time to the second husband, second and third husband,
Right.
during her marriage to the second and third husband, Billy, he would drink a lot and would beat her regularly to the point where it's documented that he broke her nose at one point.
Oh.
Shortly after their first wedding, she would shoot Billy twice and claim self defense. He lived. And the
He
only
married
issue
her
with her,
again?
I'm getting to that. The only issue with her self defense claim is that she shot him in the back. She shot him twice in the back. And from a self defense perspective, like, unless he was like, I'm going to turn around and grab this baseball bat and then turn around and beat you to death, that's not self defense. The guy's walking away from you. Betty was acquitted of this shooting because Billy refused to testify against her and basically said that he was exactly as big of an abusive piece of shit that Betty claimed that he was.
Right. I mean, he wasn't great.
He wasn't great. They remarried after she's acquitted. After she shot him, after she's acquitted, they get remarried. After the second marriage to Billy fizzled, she ended up marrying Ronnie. I don't know why it fizzled. Again, the details are hazy because the people are kind of just like, what, it's a whatever loose culture, I guess. She married this guy, Ronnie. At the time, they all lived in Arkansas, and apparently
Mm.
the physical abuse went both ways, with one documented encounter being Betty trying to beat Ronnie with a tire iron, like chasing him around like a Looney Tune. Like it was one of those things where people actually took note of this and was like,
Oh my
that's
God.
weird. So you can tell that like her mental stability in terms of how to cope with things isn't high functioning. Let's
Yeah.
just put it that loosely. So her and her kids, while she's married to Ronnie, would eventually leave the situation and move to Dallas. And when Ronnie came down to try and rehabilitate the relationship, she tries to run him over with a car. He survived the encounter and then was like, "Fuck it, I'm done. I'm just gonna move back to Arkansas. I guess this is it. This is a divorce." What's funny is at this point in Betty's story, this is the first time. The thing I'm going to articulate now is the first time that she's going to actually face jail time, and it's absolutely ludicrous how it happens. So she, again, she's trying to do what she can, right? She was trying to work as a topless dancer in a strip club where she already worked as like a bartender or something.
Hmm.
And
What year
apparently,
is this?
this would have been the 60s.
I
19, I
wonder.
don't know exact date, but 1960s.
I wonder if was it Jack Ruby's club?
Oh my God.
Because he did own a strip joint in Dallas.
In the 60s, right?
Mhm.
Wow. That would be, man, that'd be a wild tie-in. I'm gonna dig
Yeah,
into
I'm
that.
sure he knew her boss either way, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So she's trying to get this job and she has to do an audition. And during the audition, she undresses completely, which I guess in that time was illegal, and she gets arrested for public lewdness.
That's so
So
stupid.
at this point, she's shot one husband twice. She's tried running over another husband, so two attempted murders. But she gets nude in a nude club, and that results in a 30-day prison stint. Talk about the Puritans,
Wow.
right?
Yeah,
So
for real.
nuts.
That's so dumb. That makes no sense.
So we're fast forwarding a little bit to 1983, to August of 1983. She reported that her sixth marriage slash fifth husband, that guy went missing. That guy's name was Doyle. Wait, was it Doyle? I forgot. There's so many of them. Yeah, Doyle. So Doyle goes missing.
Okay.
She reports this to the authorities. Nope, I messed up. I skipped a marriage deliberately. That's what I did. So in August of 1983, she reports that her sixth marriage to husband number five, Ronnie, is that his name, Ronnie? Wow, why am I
No,
having so
oh,
much?
I'm looking
Jimmy,
at I'm looking at the Wikipedia. It's Robert, Billy, Ronnie, Doyle, Jimmy.
it's Jimmy. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
in August of 1983, she reported that her sixth marriage to husband number five, Jimmy, that guy goes missing.
Okay.
Betty had a son with her first husband. The kid's name was also Robert Branson. That's the name of her first husband. So this was a junior. And he ended up telling police that his mom told him to leave the house on August 6th of 1983, which he did. And when he came
Hmm.
home, he found his stepfather dead with two bullet holes in him.
Oh my God.
He would later tell the police that his mom asked him to help him ditch the body, then took Jimmy's fishing boat out in the middle of the lake and abandoned it to make it look like he fell overboard. The police would end up spending weeks dragging the bottom of the lake looking for Jimmy's body to no avail. Police would receive a tip that Betty had killed Jimmy and his body was somewhere at the house. I actually tried finding this information everywhere, like looking at court records and everything else. There's nothing more to this piece of information than it was just an anonymous tip. We don't know who gave it or anything
Hmm.
like that, or how they knew. So the police execute a warrant and find not only Jimmy's body in a well on the property, but also the remains of husband number four, marriage number five, Doyle Wayne Barker. She had taken steps to conceal the body. The well had been covered with fill dirt, but I imagine that that alone would probably look a little bit suspicious instead of just like maybe throwing the bodies in there and putting some tarps over it. So the police found the corpses basically. But
I wonder how many people are the bottom of wells
so I wrote this down. So this
in
wasn't a real
general.
well. This was
Okay.
decorative. So this is
Oh, but
part
it
of the
didn't even have a hole
premeditation. Well, I had a hole, but it was just as the hole was as so it was
as
built
big as
up,
the
right?
thing. Got it, got
Yeah,
it,
so
got
it
it.
was built up, and then the hole was just
Oh,
where level
that's like
ground
putting him in a
was.
box in the backyard.
Yeah, exactly. So like it turns out that Betty had asked Jimmy to build the well, knowing full well that she intended on killing him and dumping his body in there.
That's not funny. I'm sorry, Jimmy. That's funny.
Yeah, I don't know this guy, but he probably wasn't the greatest catch. I don't know. Regarding Doyle, he was a roofer, and the two were also in a physically abusive relationship and marriage,
All
per
right.
usual.
Mm-hmm.
They would divorce but still see each other after they got divorced. It was after the marriage ended that for some reason she ended up shooting him 3 times and killing him. Her daughter is the one who would testify to helping her dispose of Doyle's body, but for reasons I couldn't ascertain, she was not charged with Doyle's, or sorry, she was charged with Doyle's murder, but never went to trial for it. So the cops were like, we know you did it, but
Mm-hmm.
this will not be part of like the things that we're gonna actually prosecute you for.
Mm-hmm.
So she went to trial for the murder of Jimmy, the last husband. It's
Okay.
like there's so many names. It's like I'm confusing myself with the different number of men involved here. So she goes to trial for killing Jimmy, the last husband. One thing to note, which explains how she got the death penalty, was abuse. Like her abuse at the hands of her husbands was never a factor. Her defense attorney apparently really sucked, and the spousal abuse stuff only came out after she was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. That guy, by
What?
the way, moved on to become a district attorney in Texas. He was prosecuting a capital offense murder case and told the defense attorney that they would have to pay him $300,000 personally to drop the death penalty from the capital case. So like he ended up going to jail. Like he was a really
Good.
he apparently was like he constantly smelled the booze too at the trial. So like, he was like constantly drunk. But I mean, again, it's like the 1980s, so maybe everybody was like, that's fine. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's fine, but like the oh my God, what an asshole. I'm glad
Yeah,
he's in jail.
yeah. Her. So to my earlier point that like why her death why it resulted in a death penalty case. The murder charge is actually called murder for remuneration. I'm having a really hard time with that word, but
Remuneration.
essentially it's
Remuneration.
not remuneration.
Okay, what is it?
It's remuneration. Not
Remuneration.
yeah. There's an M at the start. It's not remuneration like you would
I
assume it
don't
would
know that
be.
Okay. Anyway, what does it mean?
So what it means is that you killed somebody for financial gain. So
Mm,
she killed these two guys because she wanted to collect the life insurance and pensions from her husbands. It
yeah.
wasn't like she was in immediate danger. It wasn't like she was actually that was the day he was going to kill her. Like it was none of that. It was because she just
Hmm.
wanted financial incentive off it. Her legal defense, legit, was that her kids murdered Jimmy. So told she testified and told the court that her two kids tried to kill this
Betty.
husband of hers. So she was like not
What?
yeah, she's not a good person. But
Oh my God.
go ahead.
I just wanted to say I was looking at her. I'm reading something about it because I'm like, I was looking for one of the things you were saying. Oh, looking for the word remuneration, whatever. The well that he was in the front yard.
Yeah, it was. It was a
That's hilarious. I feel like that's I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I've never heard of anybody being buried in the front yard
I think that I wouldn't have filled the well up. I probably would have dug the well deeper.
and put
You
it
know what? I
on
need
top
to,
of it.
again, we need to stop giving ideas to these killers, but
We need like a stop talking emoji in the Zoom. It'd be like,
seriously,
stop talking.
we're burying ourselves deeper and deeper every time we go into our narrative here. Um, I watched a YouTube video of a doctor and counselor who specializes in mental health. His channel, which I highly recommend, is called Dr. Todd Grand or Grande. It's Grand with an E. And it is not exciting. Like he does not sit. There's no flash cuts or anything. It's just like
Hmm.
a man sitting quietly behind a desk and talking facts about a case and his analysis of what he thinks happened. But it's
Nice.
really good because he's very like deliberate in his analysis.
Hmm.
And he analyzed Betty and her story and mentioned that by all accounts, it was clear that her intelligence was lower than average. Like she was not totally there mentally. The fact
Do you
that she
think that
was, go ahead, sorry.
I'm so sorry. I'm sure maybe we're saying this. Do you think that that's like nature or nurture, Like, is she like that because she never got much of an education, or is she like that because she just wasn't very smart? Like, can you educate yourself out of that?
I think up to a point. I think up to a point because think about it, like like she she seemingly chose to drop out of school and get married to that guy when she was in ninth grade.
Yeah, I mean, choose. I mean, I don't know if that's
I
the right word
know,
because
I
she
know,
was
but
like
it's
her
like
parents are abusive.
yeah, yeah, it's tough. It's
Yeah,
tough to
I don't know.
say.
I don't know. Oh, but either way, by this time, she hasn't done much reading.
No, definitely not that.
Hmm.
And this guy, Dr. Todd Grande, he also mentioned that the fact that she was deaf also
Oh, right, I forgot
created
about that.
yeah, it also created this like barrier in society to
Yeah.
her. So she was alienated from society by virtue of being deaf. She was alienated from others because her intelligence was lacking anyways, so she couldn't really keep
Hmm.
up conversations. And out of the
Hmm.
mix, every man that came into her life in whatever capacity they came into her life abused her in some way.
Yeah.
She had to work out how to survive in the world in her own way. And when you have all those factors colliding in one person, they might not have the ability to cope and adapt in a healthy way. What he called it was maladaption. So like dealing with stimulus. Like,
Hmm.
if it's like when we talk about that Egyptian guy where I'm like, there's a point in culture where you have to make a decision on like, I'm gonna go with my programming or I'm not gonna go with my programming. Like that's kind of what
Hmm.
this is. It's like yeah, like are you? Is it okay? It's obviously not okay to do what you did, but is it understandable? Probably. You know,
Hmm. Yeah.
his point
Yeah.
was that it's possible that anybody in her exact circumstances would have done what she did,
Hmm.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she would appeal her conviction and sentence at the state and federal level. She was supposed to be executed first on November 8th of 1989. An appeal halted that execution a week before it was supposed to be carried out. And this blew my mind because the amount of times her execution was stopped, like just right before it's supposed to happen, had to be like insane. Like what you feel, like it's six,
For
seven
real.
days, and okay, now it's stopped. So that one, the 1899 execution date got suspended. Then they set another execution date for a little over a year after that, on December 6th of 1990. 3 days before the day of that execution, a federal appeal put a halt to that one as well. And then 2 days before she was supposed to be killed, no, wait, sorry. Oh, that's right. So the appeal, that's what happened. So 3 days before the date of that execution, there was an appeal that a federal court granted.
Hmm.
That didn't get received by the prison until 2 days before execution. So she didn't know she was not going to be executed until December 4th for a December 6th execution date.
Wow.
She would file appeal after appeal throughout the late 1980s until she exhausted basically every avenue of appeal. It went up to the state Supreme Court, the federal Supreme Court, went up to, at that time, it would have been Rick Perry, because by this point, Bush had, yeah, Bush. Bush had started his campaign, so he was not actually governor at this point. So this would have been
Oh
February
yeah.
24th of 2000.
What is Rick Perry doing these days? I forgot about
I don't
him.
know. I don't know.
Um,
Dancing with the Stars.
Potentially. Oh, he's on the board of an oil pipeline company. That makes sense.
Yeah, that
Um,
tracks.
Wait, I have a question. I feel like why can't you just be like, I can't believe she didn't get a new trial because of her lawyer, right?
Well, that was part of the things that they appealed. So the
Okay.
fact that you have incompetent counsel on its own isn't the thing that determines whether you get a new trial or not. It's whether a competent counsel would have done anything differently that could have resulted in a different series of circumstances that wouldn't have resulted in a guilty verdict. So it's not just the fact that the guy was a piece of shit, the fact that he was drunk, the fact that he got caught trying to sell a execution for $300,000 happened after she was executed anyways.
Oh,
That would not have gone into it. The fact that nobody brought up the fact that she was abused probably wouldn't have played that much of an effect because the charge wasn't just murder or like second degree murder, it was murder by remuneration, right?
okay.
It was like he's trying to
Because the
get
charge
financial
was to get his
compensation.
money. Right.
Exactly, exactly.
Hmm.
So I would assume that that's part of the logic that played into like why that wouldn't have been enough to turn this over.
Okay.
So her day came on February 24th at 2000. By law in Texas, executions are held starting at 6 p.m. So shortly after 6 p.m. is usually when people are brought into the death chamber in
Yeah.
Huntsville and executed.
Hmm.
Huntsville, I've driven through it many, many times. It is a very scary city. It's a
Full
normal
of
city
full of screaming ghosts.
full of screaming
Is it?
ghosts. Because I mean, 570 people have. You can see the jail. Like, is when you drive on the interstate, you can look over and you can see Huntsville sitting right there. There's McDonald's there. There's like, it's just small town bullshit, right? It's just all small town bullshit. But next to you is this like immense complex of like death and like destruction. Like, it's crazy. So,
Yeah.
and they have a museum there. So the museum there is where the original Old Sparky is, and a host of other items. It's a prison museum. It's one of the most popular prison museums in the country, and it's in Huntsville. Which I actually thought to myself, I need to make it a point to go visit that at some point. But it is a
Hmm.
terrifying place. That is,
Yeah.
if you didn't grow up near it, probably isn't worth the trip. But it has a special place in Texas history, I think.
Hmm.
So she did not request any final meal, and she made no final statement. And she was injected with the lethal injection, which is in Texas entirely, it's one substance. Usually it's a three substance cocktail that makes up the injection. In
Uh-huh.
Texas, it's pentobarbital. It is just basically an overdose of heroin, more or less.
Wow.
And yeah, that was the end of her. And it's sad because she could have actually had a really good final meal because Texas didn't stop providing custom final meals until 2011. That was the
Why did they do that
last year
again?
they did that.
Because some guy like ordered a bunch of stuff or something.
Yeah, he ordered like 17 lobsters, a dozen crabs, shrimp cocktails, filet mignons, and he didn't eat any of it. And they're like, we just spent like $3,000. We're not doing
Well,
this ever again.
I feel like there's a middle ground to that. But
Yeah, so other states actually did do the same thing. So other states also removed the we can order whatever you want thing and put like a $20 or $30 cap on it. I forgot what state it was.
so
Texas was like,
funny.
we're not doing this. Like, you didn't let your victim have a final meal. You don't get that luxury either, which kind of makes sense.
Well, actually, so this reminds me of speaking of Leslie Van Houten, her getting out. I remember another woman, one of them, maybe was it Squeaky Fromm? Is she dead?
No,
Um,
Squeaky's still around.
who's the one? There's one that died, and when she died, her family was like, she died peacefully in her sleep, and that pissed me off. Because I was like,
Yeah.
if anyone deserves to not die peacefully in their sleep, it's a member of the fucking Manson family, you know?
Well, Squeaky didn't do anything wrong. Squeaky was just like, I mean, she tried to kill Gerald Ford, so she did something wrong. But she was not a part of the murderers, the
Okay.
original Manson murders. Squeaky
Oh my God,
was,
it's so funny.
yeah, she only went to jail for trying to kill Gerald Ford. Only. Is she out now? There's no way she's out. You can't try to kill a president and get out of jail. Can't. Oh my God, she's been out since 2009.
Oh my God, I'm laughing. Did you ever watch, did you ever watch 30 Rock?
No, I never got into that.
There's a doctor, it's played by Chris Parnell. And he's a doctor and it's spelled spaceman, but he calls it Spachiman. So he's like his name is Dr. Spachiman. And on Squeaky Frome's Wikipedia page, it says in 30 Rock, Dr. Leo Spachiman says that he's dating Squeaky Frome, who he describes as difficult. That's funny.
Taylor, wait, I'm reading this thing in 2019 in a televised interview. Fromm said about Manson, quote, "Was I in love with Charlie? Yeah, I still am." End quote.
Get your shit together.
Wow, that's funny. Okay. Anyways, that is Betty Lou Beets. She's a sad woman. I don't
I
know.
don't think
She's
she
not.
deserves the death penalty. That doesn't seem right.
Yeah, the rest of the ones that I read about, you know, okay, obviously she's not a good person. She's like
Sure, but she had like she was someone who was never gonna win, you
she was never
know?
gonna win. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was. It was. It's like when you hear them talking about last podcast talking about like Henry Lee Lucas, and like he like was raised in a chicken coop with like a prostitute mother, like being beaten to death. Like you're
Yeah.
never gonna make a good person that way, right?
Yeah. I mean, like
And
I'm sure like very rarely someone can pull themselves out of that, but it's hard, man. Like I don't know. It
it
sounds really
is,
hard.
it is.
Yeah.
And I read the stories of the 6 other women who have been executed in Texas, and hers was the story that was the most like, ugh, coin flip.
Yeah.
You know, the other ones were
Yeah.
obvious. The other ones were like luring, or like being a prostitute and luring men into your car to like shoot them in the head and steal their money. Like it was just like,
Yeah.
okay, like sure, your childhood could have been rough, but like that's just like very obviously predatory behavior.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. No good,
I
no
don't
good things.
know. Yeah. Yeah.
Raise your kids right, people. Seriously, just raise your kids right. Like that is the only way for us to have a better society is make better, not make better kids. Be better parents.
So did you, this is terrible. Did you see that? Okay, you know that they're awful. You know who they
I don't
are?
know what that is.
So they're the women who are like trying to ban books. They're just like very, very, very right wing in like a very, very, very bad way.
Oh,
They quoted Hitler in one of their newsletters, and it's a quote from Hitler that basically says, "If you control the children, you can control the future."
is that literally what I just said?
It's very similar to what you just said.
I'm gonna
Oh,
stand by
he
my
alone who
statement.
owns the youth gains the future from Hitler, which I think was like, I feel like you could get the same sentiment out if you quoted Whitney Houston and said, "I believe the children are the future." Whitney Houston, great. That's a yes. You are allowed to put that in your newsletter. You're not allowed to put a Hitler quote on your newsletter.
Wait, okay, but you use what I just said in the newsletter because I kind of said it in a better way
Exactly.
than that.
Anyone but Hitler.
There you go.
It's
We as
another
we
plot
learned
I will
as we
find.
learned our lesson. So that's our story.
Yeah.
That's our story of Betty Lou Beets. And you know what I started with? I started with that guy who, oh my God, in LA they caught him. He was like 85-year-old black guy who killed like a ton of people. Remember?
Lonnie Franklin, is that his name?
Something like that. But I started going
Yeah.
through
The
his
Grim Sleeper?
story. But yeah, the Grim Sleeper. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I started going through his story, and I was like, just reading off the list of his victims would be like an hour, 20 minutes of the podcast. I was like, I can't. Like, because at one point I was like, why don't I try to talk about people who people don't talk about as much because
Hmm.
their victims weren't as important to society. And I was like, dude, maybe it's not that. Maybe it's because people also reached my conclusion was like, if you actually go through his list of victims, like who's gonna you just drive your car into a telephone pole. Like you can't even listen to it for that long. He killed
That's terrible.
93 women.
I mean,
That's just the
yeah,
ones he
no.
killed. There was also like hundreds and hundreds of rapes and burglaries and like it's like so I think like maybe
Yeah.
that's why his case doesn't get much play. Is like it's just like dude, there's nothing like charming about the story at all. It's just like a absolute psychopath.
Yeah, just like murder, 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 murder.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, crazy. That's
Next
all I
week,
got.
more charm stories.
Yeah,
Uh,
we'll be more charming next week.
and
Um,
next week, people, just so you remember, is Oppenheimer and Barbie. So get your tickets.
I'm excited. I'm gonna be out. I'm going to New York. I'll be in New York next weekend, and I will watch it with my husband and brother-in-law, and I'm very excited. Um,
That'll be
they
awesome.
both
It'll be
look
really
great.
fun.
Yeah, they both look great. I'm really excited.
Sweet. Okay. Well, thank you, Taylor. Remember, everyone,
Thank you,
you can write to us
Mars.
at doomtofailpod@gmail.com. Subscribe to all the things and tell your friends and rate us on Apple
Please rate us on
Podcasts.
Apple. You have to search for us and scroll all the way down. Hit the 5 stars. Leave a comment if you'd like to. That'd be really, really cool. You can also do it on Spotify, but you have to be on the app to do it. They don't make it easy, but we appreciate it. It only takes a few seconds,
Only takes a
honestly.
few seconds.
Honestly. Or if you want to go on a date with Fars, if you live in the Austin area, he can do it for you. So
I will subscribe every single one of my dates, and it's
that,
I only get
that's
one with
option
them. I only get
2.
one. I don't know why that is, but
It's good for
after I
our
grab
numbers. It's good for our numbers.
after
You don't have second dates. So
after I
it's great.
grab the phone, it usually just like that's kind of the end of it. But at least I got to subscribe. So
Cool.
sweet. Okay, I'm gonna go cut this off. Thank you,
Thanks,
Taylor.
Fars. Thanks, Fars.